Okay, this is a very weird setup. I can hear my voice. I hope you too. I'm very happy today to be able to talk to you about my ROI Playbook. And this is not going to be the typical conference inspirational talk. This is going to be a very hardcore topic. We will talk about risk estimation, impact analysis. But hopefully, or luckily for all of us, this starts in a much more relaxed setup in Cancun. So you can imagine the beautiful weather, the white sand, the warm water. So wonderful place. But also on top of that, there is the headquarters of a very interesting company. It was back in 2017, was the largest travel company in Mexico, headquartered in Cancun. And these guys have been running with what we can call the IT project model for almost 30 years since they launched. And this moment in time, they hire a strategic consultancy to learn how they can grow faster. They have a lot of competitors popping up and they were at risk. So the first thing that these strategic consultancies tell them is that they need to move to the product operating model. And to do that, they hire a CPO experienced in the product operating model and also experienced in travel to help them go through that. When the CPO joins the company, the first thing he analyzes is that there are almost 90 ongoing projects. So these kind of strategic big initiatives, 90 of them running in parallel, so a lot of work in progress all over the place, for a company that has around 100 developers. So almost one project per developer. Things are very, very messy. We need to shrink that work in progress. And we can talk for an hour about that transformation period. But actually, what I want to talk about today is that we were trying to actually have the board approve a 33% increase in our budget in order to have more teams to, even though we will shrink the amount of things we're doing, we have multiple business units, we have very strong priorities, so we actually need more manpower to deliver on those things. And by the way, if you haven't figured out that yet, that was me, the CPO they hired to run this information. You can see me with my t-shirt there. This is the kind of the board meeting room, so we have these higher team management meetings. And you can see a cake there because it was my birthday. We won't usually have pictures from this room, but you can see there the CEO, two general managers of two different business units. Right to the right, we have the CFO, we have the chief revenue officer. So a bunch of important guys, and we were having this conversation, not this day, but we're having the conversation of increasing our budget. And these guys have a lot of questions in their heads. So they asked me, CEO, for example, asked, what's going to be the contribution of these teams that you are trying to hire? The chief financial officer, CFO, asked me, okay, but if we cannot get 30%, we can get you 10%. What can you actually deliver? And the CRO was actually having the opposite mindset. Say, if this is going to be net positive, if you give you, instead of 30%, we give you 50% more budget, what can you actually achieve? So I would say those were all very fairly logical questions to ask someone. And actually, if you ask, for example, the director of sales, hey, what's going to be the contribution if we give you more budget? He can probably say, or she can probably say, we will hire more sales representatives, and if we have reasonable amount of leads and reasonable amount of conversion rates, that will mean that we can turn that into more sales. And if you ask the operations director, he will be able to say, yes, we need this budget for a new tool, and the tool, we're going to hire it because we need to streamline our process, to fasten our attention time, and that will reduce the cost. But for the product leaders, that's a very hard question. And it's a very hard question for a number of reasons. I will try to summarize a few of the most outstanding ones. The first one is that our impact is quite diverse. As a CPO, I was working with very top-of-funnel kind of activities for marketing. And on the other extreme, I was working with the call center and bringing them some tools to streamline their process and to reduce cost. So the amount of things we can actually impact is quite diverse, and we feel sometimes that we are comparing very different bits when we are trying to measure our impact. Then we have these things that are very hard to quantify, like, hey, we are fixing some bugs in the user experience, we are doing some regulatory work, we are doing some technical dev. So that's very hard to quantify what's the impact we will get out of it. And finally, we have all this untraceable work, like the little things that we are doing in order to improve our processes, or the things that we are doing to learn more about our users and needs. So it's very hard to track how all these activities will contribute actually to impact. As a result of that, the unfortunate truth is that most product leaders or product organizations are not measuring the direct contribution of the product teams. And furthermore, what's uncomfortable is that we know, and you can put the number you want there, but we know that a large number of product initiatives fail to deliver the impact we expect them to deliver. What really comes to mind when I think about these very hard challenges is that we should be aware of the amount of, if we are aiming to be empowered teams and kind of making the decisions of what should be the priorities for the company, how much investment from the company are we actually managing? Because if you're a PM and you have one team, probably the company investment in that team goes from anywhere from 300,000 to 600,000 euros annually. This can change per region. Probably in London is much more expensive than that. If you're a team leader or a product team leader, you will probably be talking about the order of millions in the magnitude that the company is investing in the teams that you are deciding what they should be building. And if you're a VP or CPO, that number will get even higher. So essentially, what I'm here to discuss or try to convince you about is that the mission of us in our product roles is to maximize the return of investments that the company is making in all these product teams. It's a very high investment, and the company is counting on us to maximize that return. And of course, we will need to connect with the user needs, we will need to do continuous discovery, we will need to apply the shops to the framework to understand what we need to build, we need to maximize execution, find the growth loop, all these beautiful things and frameworks we use. But the reason we use them is because we are trying to maximize the value we get from these teams that we are using to build the products. Essentially, if I need to assess a product manager success, say, if you're on the table, you need to make sure that you are bringing more ROI than if you were not there and the sales teams and the operations teams were directly talking to developers. So it's a very good way to measure how much contribution we are bringing to the table. So that being said, a small comment there is that this is very hard to do, but also, more importantly, is sometimes we're not even asked these questions. So we go in our day-to-day lives kind of putting down fires, and we are not even asked to do this job, but this is how we can actually make sure that we are contributing and become more indispensable for the company, or show at least how valuable we are for the company. That being said, that's why I will try to talk about our ROI Playbook. Hopefully that shows you why this is important. And we have three parts. First, we will bring some clarity about the impacts. We will also talk about the investment transparency, how we are investing these resources. And finally, we will talk about risk and the future of ROI. Why I'm here today? What I told, I'm the VP of Product at the local. I've been working for the last 2 decades in different product leadership roles in different companies, different company sizes, different continents even. But furthermore, in the last 10 years, I've been really engaged in putting out there some content, trying to share what I learned about this product experience. So that's part of why I'm here. And as I said, we have regional coordinators. I'm the regional coordinator for EMEA. So if you are in this region, somewhere in this region, please reach out if you haven't been, if you haven't been to Product Tank, or if you want to start one in your region, I'm the person to talk to. You can find me in the booth. So that being said, let's start with having clarity about our impacts. And the way I like to talk about this is that I have a coaching experience with a team that they were really struggling because they have a problem. There was a software as a service company, and it was a collaboration tool. And they realized that the users they have on the platform were not sending enough invitations to their colleagues in order to join the platform. So they were saying, hey, we find this very hard problem. We have this idea of how to change it. And I keep asking, hey, amazing. What would be the impact? Yeah, we really increase the amount of invites sent. I keep asking, okay, so what? Well, that was very important. We need our users to, in order to fulfill their vision with the product, to send invitations. Okay, but can you tell me that in a way that the CEO will be excited about it? And we kept hitting the same roadblock. He was not able to connect the dots between these invites being sent and what will actually mean for the company. So luckily, we have a lot of tools to do that. And what we usually suggest is that we model the KPIs in a way. And there's a very useful tool to do that, which is the KPI tree. And the KPI tree will help you connect from this very little product lever that you may have, maybe not visible in the end, but it's the number of invitations sent per user. And we can build the connection of, if we change that number, how will that impact the annual recurrent revenue from the company? So hopefully you are sending invitations. Those invitations will have a conversion rate. The conversion rate means that you are increasing the number of users from that client within the product, which if you multiply for the price you are charging them, you will have new revenue from existing clients, and that will impact the annual recurring revenue. So now I keep asking this person, this PM, hey, can you now tell me how your change here will affect annual recurring revenue? And he said, well, no, because we have so many other things moving. We have, for example, the customers who may send invitations, but they are churning, so they will not send any invitations. Or we have new leads that are constantly coming to the table, which are not in this equation. So that's fair enough. We can actually complete the tree to see that picture. But when we are trying to analyze the impact of product work, what we need to do is to isolate one variable and say, if I only change this and everything else remain the same, how much money will I be contributing to annual recurring revenue? And to make this more explicit, we will do some math in order to try to put this into numbers and make it more explicit. Okay, so the KPI tree, not expecting you to read that in the end, I will try to go through it. The KPI tree can be actually transformed into a table. And actually, it's a very good exercise to build useful dashboards, is to understand, okay, what's my model of KPIs, and translate it into a dashboard, a table that you can see. So for example, in the case of this company, we had that they have 10,000 existing users. They were sending a very low number of invites, so 0.1 per user per month, and they have a conversion rate, which eventually means that currently, with the current way of sending invitations, they were having 50 new customers per month, 600 per year from the same clients, from existing clients, which multiplied by their average seat per price per seat, they will have 120,000 euros, new euros coming every year that will impact the last line, which is the annual recurring revenue. Of course, in the middle, we can keep expanding this table, but we have recurring revenue from existing clients or renewals. We have new customers coming to the table. But this is the part of the table we really want to focus on in order to measure the impact of this little thing that we're working on. So essentially, what we do is we keep every other number the same, and we change the variable that we are aiming to hit. So we say, now with this new flow that we are doing, they will send, on average, 1 invite per month. So if we run the numbers, this will actually have a huge impact. We'll go the new revenue from existing clients will go above 1 million euros, which means that they will have a difference in annual recurring revenue of almost 1 million. And of course, this doesn't mean that we are trying to predict the annual recurring revenue because we are only analyzing one feature, but whatever the final number is for this annual recurring revenue, we have 1 million driven by this feature. That's what we're trying to get from this calculus. So the typical problem I face when I go with PMs coaching in this manner and trying to get this number is that they say, hey, this is a lot of work. There is no way in the world I can do this for every single feature I have in the backlog. First of all, my first answer is, if you are not doing that, you are not showing your value. So you better do it even though it's great work. But the second, the good news, is that we actually have a way to systematize this. Because if you think about your products, probably if you have 2, 3, 4 of these little table templates, that will cover 99% of the features you are trying to build. Unless your business model is changing, the numbers, the KPI tree, these models are super stable. So you can actually build these tables once and then just update the numbers, but the model is still the same, and you can, within 5 minutes, you can do hypotheses for new ideas, and you can actually also evaluate the impact of single ideas based on these numbers on the final lines of the P&L. That will be the ones that the CEOs, the CFOs really care about. So this is how it will look like if you are doing this in practice. You have this opportunity list. These guys have this new way to share with colleagues. This will affect a particular product level, the number of invites sent per user. We have a hypothesis that will change by 0.9, which we can now calculate the annual recurring revenue. They can compare this with other things, like, for example, having more incentive to show in the invites, which will mean that we are trying to change a different level, the invite conversion rate. And if we increase 5%, which is our estimation or hypothesis, this will have a much lower impact in our recurring revenue. So running through these models, through these tables, again, once you build a table, very painful at the beginning. Same thing that if we will interviews for the first time, will be very painful at the beginning. You will become better at it. Same thing for the impact estimation. And with that, we gain impact clarity, the first stepstone in our ROI playbook. Let's now jump to investment transparency. And the challenge here is that we are, as I said at the beginning, we have multiple things that we're doing. So as a PM, sometimes it feels like, hey, we are doing some little projects over there. We are doing some discovery experiments, so investing some time in a fake door over there. We are fixing some bugs on the experience over here. It quickly becomes very hard to understand how we are investing this many amount of hours that our teams are investing in the different things we need to work on. And by the way, if you become senior PM, things become more hot, so it's more like more important projects, on-fire projects. And when you become a product leader, it feels more like this. So it's very hard to understand how your teams are actually investing this money that the CEO and CFO are giving you to work with these teams. So, easy way to go through this is, the first one is that I strongly suggest, if you don't have this already, is that you build what I call an investment profile. And actually, I have this little acronym to just give you a starting point, but you can adapt this to whatever needs you have in your company. But it's somehow categorizing the things you do into different buckets. So with this SCOPE acronym, we have first the strategy, which is basically the things that you are doing, that are the ones that we agreed upon, that are on the roadmap, the big initiatives. But we also have some things that we do due to dependencies. So some teams, especially in big companies, some teams will come to us and say, hey, I need to run this project, but in order to do that, I need you to build this little thing for me. Those are a different bucket because you will have zero impact from that. The other team will have the impact probably, and you need to account for that when you are reporting your results. Third one is optimization, which is these little things that are not probably on the strategy, tweaks to the interface. We have, for example, this request from a client that is not super strategic, but we need to do it in order for them to sign up. So all these little things that come our way. And finally, the enablers, those beautiful things we love, like regulation stuff, technical debt, all these beautiful things that we need to also invest time on. So in order to put that into practice, you go to your task management system, Jira, or whatever. You also combine that with your strategy and roadmap, can be in any multiple formats. But what we get out of tagging the tasks and putting the strategic initiatives into our task management system is that now we have sizing of our strategic bets. So how much we are spending by each strategic pillar that we are investing on. So this is actually very easy to do, or it's a very easy first step. But what I find very interesting is that companies usually think that when we agree on the roadmap, on the strategy, we are investing 80% of our time on that. And that's usually very far from the truth. So you, as a product manager, as a product lead, need to be able to build this investment profile I was mentioning before in order to be very transparent and tell the stakeholders, the CEO, hey, we agree on that strategy, but we are actually being able to spend around 45% of our time in that strategy. The rest of the time is either on dependencies, on maintenance work, on enablers. So this is very important to have a conversation on, okay, how much ROI can I actually have if I'm only investing part of my time in the strategy work. So again, to systematize this into the playbook, very easy to do. We just go and tag all our work. You can actually use AI to do that nowadays. But this will be very useful, first of all, to do analysis, which is what I was describing, how much we invest in each category. Also for forecasting. I have found teams that say, hey, last quarter we spent 50% of our time in maintenance work or technical debt, but next quarter we will invest 10%. And that's actually not very accurate. It's much better to do a forecast based on the past than try to predict the future. You will be much more accurate and you will have much more logical numbers for your stakeholders. So this is how it will look like with the cost. So we have the opportunities, we have the impact, now we have the cost, and for the first time we can calculate the ROI. So that's great. We're still having ROI per each of our initiatives, but that's not the end of it, right? Because we mentioned that we have these other buckets that will not drive impact, but will still have cost. So we need to have an ROI updated based on what we are actually investing in the entire team. Because these activities will not go away, and to understand the ROI of your team, you actually need to bake them into the equation. So hopefully now we have investment clarity, and we will jump now to assessing the risk and the future ROI. And why this is important, because as I mentioned, as PMs, we are working on the maximizing the ROI, but we are making decisions about what will we build in the future, not in the past. We can analyze with all these tools our ROI in the past, but if we are trying to predict the future, we need to think about what will be the ROI if we select these initiatives, to prioritize these initiatives today. In order to do that, what we need to take into consideration is that if 70% or N% of initiatives will fail, we need to bake that into the equation, right? ROI cannot be just the sum of all our impacts minus the cost divided by the cost. By the way, this is the ROI formula. That's probably what I should have shown before. But we need to multiply that by some factor considering the risk we have of these initiatives. But not all initiatives are equal in risk. So we want to bake into this formula something that is related to the evidence we have about this initiative. So we can think, for example, if we only have opinions, so we have no evidence, this will probably land in the most initiatives fail, so 70 to 80% risk failure. If we have some quick estimates, we will lower it, but just a bit. If we have some anecdotal evidence, some researching NPS surveys, or having some conversation with customers, lower a bit more. If we have some experiments, lower even further. And by the way, again, this is just a model that I kind of built, but you can have your own in your company. You need to align this with your teammates, but also with stakeholders. How much do we value the conversation with customers versus having experiments? If you want more source of inspiration for that, there are two great books. One is by Itamar Gilad, Evidence Guided. The other one is by Alberto Saboya, The Right It. They talk a lot about evidence and how we can use evidence to analyze our potential impacts. So how we systematize this, one last time, we will score our opportunities. We will use the scoring for two reasons. If we look at the past, we will use to adjust our results. So for example, if we are saying, hey, whenever a customer is requesting something, we are giving it a very high score in terms of confidence, but then we build it and nothing happens. So we will lower the amount, the value or the risk factor for the one customer requests something. On the other hand, we can also use it to prioritize discovery, because if we have these very important things that we expect to drive a lot of impact, but we are seeing that the risk factor is super high, then we can use this information to prioritize discovery and start lowering the risk factor for these important initiatives. So how will that affect our table? We now have a risk factor, depending on the evidence we have, again. So we will multiply the annual recurring revenue per the risk factor, and the future ROI will change dramatically. Now, will be, of course, reduced or will increase as long as I'm gathering more evidence. We for sure want to compare that with a real ROI in the future, so we will do the retrospective analysis, and this is true for all variables. We have an impact estimate that we want to compare with the reality. We have a cost estimate, we want to compare that with reality, and then we'll have the real ROI versus the predictive ROI. So we have now our three levers, so hopefully, we can celebrate. But I know that you may have a question in the back of your mind, what do we gain from all of this? If I have this number on the table, what actually I'm able to do now that we did all these calculations? Essentially, this will unlock a world of new opportunities to maximize the ROI. So that's why we are doing it, because we want to maximize it, and this analysis will help you do that. Basically, we have, I love to build with the teams I'm coaching, this Insight Central. So we have this team that is spending much of their time in maintenance. So we can have a very transparent conversation with stakeholders saying, if we want to invest more in strategic initiatives for this team, probably we need to increase the size. And it's a very good way to argument for increasing the number of developers, for example, in your team. We can have another team that they have low volume of high impact initiatives, and we need to work with them in doing more exploratory research to kind of impact the opportunity space. We can have a team that is getting to each quarter with a very high risk factor, so they are not investing enough in discovery. So we can have all these conversations that as PMs will help us be more empowered and have this kind of higher level conversation with stakeholders. And if you're a product leader, this will actually give you a great tool to have a coaching conversation that is not based simply on how they are working, but based on how much they are collecting evidence and how much they are driving impacts. So hopefully now you have a concrete path to visualize and maximize ROI in your organizations. Thank you.